On the Frontier Research Station, Aurelia 9, nestled within the gravity-manipulating fields of the binary planet Orexia Prime, interspecies cadets trained under the watchful eye of the Galactic Testing Consortium. The standards of physical endurance were legendary, and humans were considered the weakest species. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. A sprawling complex of titanium and transparent alloy domes suspended in the anomalous gravity well between Orexia Prime and its sister planet. The entire facility rotated slowly, creating a mesmerizing dance of light and shadow as the binary suns rose and set in quickening succession. It was here that the galaxy's most promising cadets came to test their physical limits, to push beyond what their species considered possible. This morning, the central testing chamber hummed with anticipation. Cadets from 17 different worlds stood at attention, their diverse physiologies reflecting the grand tapestry of galactic life. Six-limbed Orexians with their iridescent feathers and reinforced skeletal structures occupied the front rows, their posture radiating confidence. Behind them stood the silicon-based Lithorians, their crystalline forms glinting under the harsh lights. Methane-breathing Vordulians, amphibious Neptulans, and even a contingent of gaseous aeroforms waited their turn. And at the very back, almost hidden from view, stood 5 humans. Commander Zeltura, the consortium's chief examiner, strode to the center of the chamber. His Orexian features were stern, his primary wings folded tightly against his back in formal display. Cadets. His voice resonated through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Today marks the culmination of your preparatory training. The gravity endurance trial will determine your assignments within the consortium's exploration fleet. His golden eyes swept across the assembled cadets. As you know, standard procedure calls for progressive gravity increases, beginning at 2G. A ripple of anticipation passed through the non-human cadets. 2G was barely a warm-up for most of them. However, Zeltura continued, our mission parameters have changed. Recent discoveries in the Cygnus Void require personnel capable of withstanding extreme conditions. Therefore, today's test will begin at 5G, with the option to go higher for those who excel. Every unhuman competitor exchanged knowing glances. 5G was challenging but manageable for most species present, except humans. The 5 human cadets visibly stiffened, their faces betraying a mixture of shock and resignation. All except one. Lieutenant Mara Quinn, a quiet human engineer volunteer, stepped forward when her name was called. Unlike her fellow humans, she appeared calm, almost bored. Her movements were fluid and unhurried as she approached the gravity chamber, a transparent cylinder at the center of the room. She fiddled with the safety straps as though adjusting an ill-fitting uniform rather than preparing for a potentially lethal test. Lieutenant Quinn, Commander Zeltura said, his voice carrying a note of what might have been pity. You may withdraw without penalty. Human physiology is not designed for these parameters. Mara looked up, her gray eyes meeting the commander's golden ones. I'll proceed with the test, sir, she said simply. Behind her, an Orexian cadet named Trelvex snickered. She won't last 10 seconds. Their bones crack under their own weight if they sneeze too hard. The comment drew chuckles from several nearby cadets, but Mara ignored them, stepping into the chamber with practiced ease. As the door sealed behind her, she took a deep breath and centered herself. The control panel outside the chamber lit up, displays indicating her vital signs and the chamber's gravitational output. Commander Zeltura gave her one final, questioning look. Mara nodded, and the test began. The Orexians had dominated galactic politics and exploration for centuries, their civilization built on gravity engine technology, their homeworld, Orexia Prime, experienced natural gravitational fluctuations due to its binary system, which had driven their evolution toward reinforced bone structures and powerful musculature. They had mastered artificial gravity before achieving spaceflight, a reversal of the technological progression seen in most species. This mastery made them uniquely suited to deep space exploration, especially in extreme environments. It also instilled a cultural arrogance. They saw themselves as the paragons of physical perfection, viewing softer-bodied species with barely concealed condescension. Humans, with their relatively fragile frames and lack of evolutionary adaptations to varied gravity, were particularly derided. In briefing sessions, commanders openly joked about human fragility. They can't even handle 2G for extended periods. The Orexian Captain Krell had chirped during yesterday's orientation, pointing at the human cadets relegated to maintenance duty. Their hearts struggle. Their blood pools. Their consciousness fades. It's a wonder they ever left their home planet. The human cadets had endured the mockery in silence, their eyes downcast. All except Mara Quinn, who had smiled faintly, as though privy to a private joke. What the Orexians didn't know, what even her fellow humans didn't know, was Mara's unique background. She had grown up on Titan Colony, a settlement in Saturn's orbit where gravity was a mere fraction of Earth's. Children born there developed differently, their bones more brittle, their muscles less dense. It was a problem that plagued early colonization efforts throughout the solar system. Mara's parents were bioengineers, pioneers in human adaptation technology. When she was 11, Mara became the first recipient of experimental nanolattice implants, microscopic structures that integrated with her skeletal system, providing reinforcement without adding significant weight. The technology was revolutionary, but risky, requiring years of refinement before it could be approved for general use. By the time Mara reached adulthood, her modified physiology allowed her to adapt to gravitational forces that would incapacitate unmodified humans. She had continued her parents' research, secretly refining the nanolattice design and incorporating new elements that responded dynamically to changing pressures. Her enhancements were undetectable by standard medical scans, appearing as natural bone density variations, a fact that had allowed her to join the consortium without revealing her modifications. Now, as the gravity in the chamber increased, Mara felt the familiar pressure building. At 2G, she remained perfectly comfortable. At 3G, she felt the weight but made no adjustment. At 4G, she subtly shifted her stance for optimal balance. Outside, the observers watched in growing confusion. Human cadets typically showed visible strain by 3G, yet Mara stood straight, her breathing regular, her vital signs stable. 5G, announced the technician operating the controls. This was the threshold, the starting point for today's test. Around her, Mara could see other chambers activating as additional cadets began their trials. Through the transparent walls, she watched an Orexian male brace himself, his tertiary wings extending slightly for balance. A Lithorian cadet crystallized her lower extremities, widening her base for stability. Mara simply stood, hands at her sides, feet shoulder-width apart. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily, tracking her heart rate, blood pressure, and oxygen levels. All remained within acceptable parameters. Commander Zeltura frowned, checking the readouts against his datapad. "Is the chamber malfunctioning?" he asked the technician. "No, sir. Gravitational field is uniform at 5G, all systems functioning normally." Captain Krellmore stepped closer, his feathers ruffling in disbelief. "Impossible. Check her file again. She must be from a high-gravity Earth region." But Mara's file clearly stated her Titan colony origin, one of the lowest gravity human settlements. The contradiction made no sense. Inside the chamber, Mara felt the familiar warmth spreading through her bones as the nanolattice adjusted to the increasing pressure. The latest generation of implants included proprioceptive feedback, allowing her to feel exactly how the structures were responding and to make minute adjustments through neural commands. It was almost like having an additional muscular system, one made of materials far stronger than organic tissue. The disruptive event came suddenly. As the test continued and all cadets maintained their positions at 5 Gs, Commander Zeltura decided to increase the challenge. "All chambers to 6G, he ordered. "Let's separate the explorers from the station crew." The pressure increased. Around the room, cadets adjusted their stances. A few of the smaller species began to show signs of strain. The aeroform participant condensed their gaseous form to better withstand the compression. Mara felt the change and responded internally, directing her nanolattice to redistribute support to her spine and joints. To external observers, she appeared unchanged. 7G, came the next command. Now even the Aurexians were making visible adjustments. Trelvex, who had mocked her earlier, widened his stance and activated his species' natural gravity compensation, a temporary stiffening of the cartilage between their vertebrae. 2 cadets from smaller species activated their emergency protocols and were removed from their chambers. Mara remained steady. Is she even feeling it?" whispered a Neptulan observer, their gill flaps pulsing with agitation. 8G, Commander Zeltura announced, his voice tight with disbelief. At this level, even seasoned Aurexian warriors began to grunt with effort. Their reinforced bone structures were being tested to their limits. Captain Krellmore watched in astonishment as Mara tapped her leg, making what appeared to be a minor comfort adjustment rather than a desperate attempt to remain standing. Whispers spread among the observers. Is she smiling? Indeed. A faint smile had formed on Mara's lips, not of strain, but of satisfaction. The nanolattice was performing beyond expected parameters. Each generation of the technology had improved upon the last, but this was the first true field test of the latest version. She could feel the microscopic structures adapting dynamically, distributing force evenly throughout her body, preventing any single point from bearing too much pressure. 10G, ordered Commander Zeltura, his voice now carrying a note of challenge. The remaining non-human cadets were struggling visibly. 3 more activated their emergency protocols and were evacuated from their chambers. Only the largest Aurexians, a particularly dense Lithorian, and Mara remained. And still, she stood without apparent effort. The control room erupted in confusion. Technicians triple-checked their equipment. Medical officers reviewed the biological readings in disbelief. Security personnel moved closer to Mara's chamber, as though expecting some form of deception to be revealed. 12G, Commander Zeltura ordered, his wings now fully extended in the Aurexian display of extreme attention. The Lithorian cadet crystallized completely, entering a suspended state that could withstand immense pressure, but rendered them immobile, a survival tactic rather than a demonstration of functional endurance. 2 of the remaining Aurexians activated their emergency protocols, leaving only Trelvex and 1 other. Mara inhaled deeply, feeling the enormous pressure on her chest. At this level, even with the nanolattice support, she needed to consciously control her breathing. Each breath required focused effort, but she managed it without showing external signs of struggle. Her heart pumped steadily, reinforced blood vessels maintaining circulation despite the crushing force. Trelvex was now visibly straining, his proud posture compromised, his breathing labored. His eyes locked with Mara's through the transparent walls of their respective chambers, incomprehension giving way to something approaching fear. Commander Zeltura made a decision that would reverberate through the consortium for years to come. 15G, he commanded. Final threshold. Triple the standard 5G threshold. A gravitational force that would instantly incapacitate an unprotected human, crushing their organs and rupturing blood vessels. A force that even Aurexians could withstand only briefly before risking permanent injury. The last Aurexian cadet besides Trelvex activated his emergency protocol. Trelvex himself was now bent almost double, his reinforced frame creaking audibly over the chamber's microphones. And Mara? Mara walked in place. 1 step, another. Her arms rose from her sides, extending outward in a gesture that looked almost like a dance. The gravity field hummed with intensity. Floor panels creaked under her movement. The control room fell silent. The watching cadets stood frozen in disbelief. Captain Krellmore's feathers ruffled in shock, a full-body response that Orexians reserved for moments of extreme surprise or fear. "Impossible," gasped a senior medical officer, a Vordulian whose 6 eyes were all fixed on Mara's display panel. "No carbon-based life can endure this while maintaining mobility. No organism with fluid circulation should be conscious." But Mara was more than conscious. She was demonstrating control, precision, mastery of an environment that should have rendered her instantly incapacitated. In a final, definitive gesture, she raised her right hand and offered a crisp military salute to Commander Zeltura. The commander's response was immediate. "End the trial," he ordered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the gravity generators. "All chambers to normal gravity. Now." As the crushing force relented, Trelvex collapsed to his knees, trembling with exertion. Medical teams rushed to assist him and the other cadets who had pushed their limits, but Mara simply rolled her shoulders, stretched her neck, and waited for the chamber door to open. When it did, she stepped out calmly, brushing dust from her uniform as though returning from a routine exercise rather than making history. The room fell silent as she approached Commander Zeltura, who stood rigid with astonishment. "Lieutenant Quinn," he said finally, "an explanation is required." Mara nodded. "Yes, sir, I believe it is." She turned to address not just the commander, but the entire assembly. "What you've witnessed is the successful demonstration of 5th-generation nanolattice implant technology. My skeletal structure has been enhanced with a microscopic support framework that dynamically responds to gravitational pressure." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing an unmarked arm. "The implants are integrated at the molecular level. There are no external signs. The technology was developed on Titan Colony to address bone density issues in low-gravity environments, but its applications extend far beyond that. Why were we not informed of this enhancement?" Captain Krellmore demanded, recovering some of his composure. "The technology is still classified," Mara replied evenly. "This was as much a test of the nanolattice as it was of my own capabilities. I'm authorized to share basic information now that the field test has been successful." Commander Zeltura's expression shifted from shock to intense interest. "These implants, they allow all humans to withstand such forces? Any properly prepared recipient?" "Yes," Mara confirmed. "The early versions had limitations, but the current generation adapts to the user's physiology. With proper training, recipients can function normally at up to 20 G for short periods." The implications rippled through the assembly. Species that had evolved natural adaptations to gravitational forces, adaptations that had given them considerable advantages in space exploration and combat, were suddenly facing the prospect of humans with technological enhancements that surpassed their biological capabilities. "This technology," the commander said slowly, "would be of immense value to the consortium." Mara nodded. "That's why I'm here. Sir, my secondary mission is to evaluate interspecies compatibility. Preliminary research suggests the nanolattice can be modified for Aurexian physiology, among others." A murmur spread through the watching cadets. Trelvex, still being attended by medical staff, stared at Mara with an expression that mingled humiliation with reluctant admiration. The consortium halted all remaining trials for the day. As the cadets dispersed, buzzing with conversation about what they had witnessed, a profound shift had already begun, not just in the assessment of human capabilities, but in the power dynamics of the Galactic Testing Consortium itself. In the aftermath, humble astonishment spread through the assembled aliens. Theories that had guided their understanding of biological limitations were being hastily revised. Research priorities were realigned. Training protocols were flagged for immediate review. Captain Krellmore, approached Mara as she prepared to leave the testing chamber. His proud bearing had softened, his wings held in the position Aurexians reserved for equals rather than subordinates. "Lieutenant Quinn," he said, his voice pitched low so only she could hear. "I owe you an apology. My comments about human fragility were—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Uninformed." Mara nodded, accepting the closest thing to contrition an Aurexian captain was likely to offer. "We've all made assumptions based on incomplete data." "Captain," she replied diplomatically. "That's why we test our theories." "Indeed." He hesitated, then continued. "The Aurexian High Command will be very interested in this nano-lattice technology. Would you be willing to share your research with our bioengineering division?" "That's ultimately a diplomatic decision," Mara said, "but I'm authorized to initiate preliminary discussions." She offered a data chip containing unclassified specifications. "This contains the basic principles, a gesture of good faith." The captain accepted the chip with a formal bow. His tertiary wings extended in the Aurexian sign of respect. "We will study this carefully. Perhaps there is more our species can learn from each other than we realized." As Mara walked away, Commander Zeltura was already engaged in an animated conversation with the consortium's governing council via holographic link. The political and military implications of her demonstration would be far-reaching. Species that had relied on their natural gravitational adaptations as a strategic advantage would need to reassess their position. Exploration missions to high-gravity worlds would no longer be the exclusive domain of the physically robust species. The 5 human cadets gathered around Mara as she returned to their quarters, their expressions ranging from awe to betrayal. "You knew about this technology?" asked Cadet Zhang, the most senior among them. "All this time we've been enduring their mockery." "I couldn't tell you." Mara cut him off gently. "The project was classified at the highest level. Even now, I can only share basic information." "Will we all get these implants?" asked Cadet Okafor, her eyes wide with anticipation. "That depends on many factors," Mara replied. "Compatibility, resources, political considerations. But yes, the technology is being prepared for wider implementation." As they spoke, Mara's personal communication device chirped. A message from Earth Command, acknowledging the successful demonstration and authorizing the next phase of the operation, attached were the access codes for a secure storage bay on the station's lower level. Later that evening, as the station's lights dimmed to simulate night, Mara made her way to that storage bay. Inside, she found what she had been promised, a crate of sealed prototypes, each containing a more specialized version of the nano-lattice technology. Some were designed for extreme cold, others for radiation resistance, still others for underwater pressure adaptation. As Mara surveyed the prototypes, her smile remained, the same serene expression she had worn during the gravity test. In the distance, through the bay's viewport, she could see the binary planets of the Aurexian system, their gravitational dance creating the very anomalies that had shaped Aurexian evolution. Humanity had spent its history adapting environments to suit its needs. Now, with technologies like the nano-lattice, they were beginning to adapt themselves instead, not through the slow process of evolution, but through the rapid innovation of engineering. It was a fundamental shift, one that would rewrite the power structures of galactic society. The next morning, Mara was summoned to Commander Zeltura's office. The Aurexian sat behind his desk, his posture formal but lacking the condescension she had grown accustomed to. "Lieutenant Quinn," he began without preamble, "the consortium has re-evaluated your assignment based on yesterday's demonstration." Mara stood at attention, waiting. "You are being reassigned to the research vessel Exogravity. Its mission is to explore the Cygnus Void, specifically, the neutron star cluster at its center." He paused, then added, "Areas previously considered inaccessible due to gravitational intensity." I understand, sir. You will serve as both engineer and test subject. Your expertise with the nano-lattice technology will be essential for the mission's success. He extended a data pad. Your new orders. The ship departs in 48 hours. Mara accepted the pad, scanning the details. The mission parameters were ambitious, exploring environments with gravitational fluctuations that would crush conventional vessels. But the exogravity was equipped with experimental shielding based on principles similar to her nano-lattice implants. It was the perfect test bed for the next phase of the technology. One more thing, Lieutenant, the commander added. Captain Trelvex has requested assignment to the same mission. Mara looked up in surprise. Trelvex, sir, after yesterday. He was most insistent, Commander Zeltura said, a note of amusement in his voice. He believes there is much to learn from working alongside you. The commander's wings shifted in what Mara had learned was the Orexian equivalent of a knowing smile. Sometimes, Lieutenant Quinn, the most valuable outcome of a test is not proving superiority, but discovering new possibilities for cooperation. Mara nodded, understanding the deeper significance. Yesterday's demonstration had not simply been about showing human capability. It had been about changing perceptions, opening doors to collaboration that species pride had previously kept shut. I look forward to working with Captain Trelvex, she said diplomatically. As she left the commander's office, Mara's thoughts turned to the mission ahead. The neutron star cluster represented a frontier that even the Orexians, with their natural adaptations, had been unable to explore effectively. With human innovation and Orexian experience combined, however, new discoveries awaited. She passed a viewport and paused, looking out at the binary planets and the vast, star-filled void beyond. Somewhere out there, other species were developing their own adaptations and technologies. The galaxy was full of environments humans had once considered uninhabitable, challenges once thought insurmountable. But that was the thing about humans that other species consistently underestimated. They didn't accept limitations as permanent. When faced with an obstacle, they engineered a solution. When told something was impossible, they took it as a challenge rather than a warning. As Mara continued toward her quarters to prepare for the new assignment, her communication device chirped again. A message from her parents on Titan Colony, responding to her encrypted report about the successful demonstration. Their reply was brief but filled her with pride. Phase 1 complete. Prototype performed beyond expectations. Proceed to Phase 2. The universe is opening to us. Mara smiled. Yes, it was. One gravity chamber at a time. The stars outside seemed to twinkle in agreement, as though the cosmos itself was acknowledging this small but significant shift in the order of things. Humanity's surprising evolution was, indeed, only just beginning.